Okay. A quick review of the agenda and materials today. We have two panel presentations today focusing on Everett's downtown, what's the vision, and what are the challenges. And there's 4 folks that are going to be presenting then. It's a tight timeline on that one, but we're going to make some time for questions and answers. Then we have a presentation on the existing services that the county and others are providing to address the needs of the homeless and other street-level social issues in downtown. Before we do that, we're going to do some sort of logistics stuff to begin with, and hopefully review and sign off on a charter for the task force that we reviewed last time. We made some changes at your direction, and we'll be asking for a vote in support of that charter today. Are there any questions before we move forward? Okay, I'm going to just do a quick logistics thing here on the ground rules, which are in your binder behind the tab Panel Rules and Roles. We're going to come back to the mission statement, but I'll just recap a little bit. It's important that folks use the mics, monitor your airtime. If you want to make a comment to make sure I call on you, turn your table card like that, and then we will get the mic to you so that we're not all talking over each other. And I think somewhere in your binder you have one of these, which is our self-policing device, and you can police one another with this. Red herring, if you see somebody who is paying absolutely no attention to the ground rules, feel free to wave this at them. My favorite is when people wave it on themselves. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but so anyway, don't forget you have this. I think that's really basically what I had to say. So I wanted to just turn it over for Chris as our chair presiding today. Sylvie is out of the state right now caring for her mom. So Chris is going to be presiding for us today.
One of the challenges we have in doing that is making sure that we represent the diverse population that we're talking about. And so in terms of the discussion that's occurred behind the scenes, and Sylvia has been a big part of this discussion, we feel that having a focus group of a panel of people would give us a better look at the different issues affecting that population across a wider spectrum, rather than having one person on the task force that we ask to represent that whole population on a variety of issues. Obviously, it's difficult for one person to talk about their personal experiences when we're talking about mental health, addiction, homelessness, all of the different things that play into this. And so I'll let Karen pick it up from there and talk about it in a little bit more detail. But that's the proposal we'd like to make to the task force, is that we look at this from a broader perspective and use a focus group type of approach, something that we can report back to the task force on the findings from that focus group.
Thanks, Chris. One of the other things that we're going to do, because we felt that for the reasons that Chris identified, the group felt that, the city and the co-chairs felt that it wasn't appropriate to have a homeless person on the task force. We have identified a couple of other ways we're going to make sure that those voices are heard, in addition to just the comments here for people who come to this meeting. There will be an additional evening meeting that the co-chairs will host as a public hearing. Everyone here is invited to participate, but it's not necessary. But that will be an opportunity not only for homeless, but anybody else in the community to come to the microphone and say whatever comments they want to say. We have not yet scheduled that meeting, but we will do so. We'll let you know when it is. And we will do the meeting notes from that, so you will get a written transcript of the comments from everyone, and that will be shared with you and will be part of the record for the task force if you weren't able to be there in person. And another thing that we're going to do, which I think is pretty cool, is Sylvia has offered to host a focus group of homeless individuals at the Gospel, and we're going to collect your ideas and others about some of the questions we could potentially ask this group of individuals. It's not going to be one of those things where 100 people can come watch them. That's not the way to have a successful focus group. But try to get some questions, get their input, and again, take the notes and make sure that that information gets back to you so you can see what the perspectives are in a sort of a conversational setting from a group of homeless people regarding the issues that we've been asked to address here. So those are two things that we're going to do that we hope will be helpful to address that concern that was raised. Okay. Yeah? Okay, thank you, Chris. In your meeting materials, this is a huge packet, sorry. They won't all be this huge, or there won't be any trees left on the forehills, but the first couple of pages, let me just flag, I should have covered this before. The first couple of pages are an updated contact list. You can just put this in your binder. Then there's also a corrected list of the meeting dates. We had inadvertently left out October 2 on the last go-around. Don't want to do that. So this is to be replaced in the binders that you have now. And behind that, hopefully you've already found it, is the agenda. And don't mess with this too badly just yet because you'll get lost. There's not a lot of color coding on the paper, but it is in the order in which we will discuss it today. So behind your agenda, oh, wait a sec. Yeah, behind your agenda, you'll find a draft meeting summary from the first meeting, noting who was there and what was discussed. And this is not intended to be a verbatim transcript, but like it's not writing down what all the presentations were. In particular, it's focused on capturing the ideas that were raised by the task force at the table. So what we're going to ask you to do is take a minute, if you haven't had an opportunity, this was sent to you electronically on Monday. If you would like to take a minute to just take a look at this, and when people are comfortable, I would entertain a motion to approve, and if there are any amendments or corrections, we'll run through those as well. So take a minute to look at that, and then if somebody's comfortable moving approval of this or offering an amendment, raise your little card there and we'll get that going.
Karen, I have one small amendment, and it's just around the comment about youth and how long they can stay. They can actually stay 21 days. I know it's small, but I wanted it to be accurate.
Cassie, can you help me out with where that is
It's
in
on
this?
page 2.
Okay. So that should be 21 instead of 20?
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other corrections or questions, well, like you think something that was important to capture isn't in here? We're trying to keep these short, not the verbatim transcript that you would see from a city council meeting, but that will let people still know what was discussed and who was here.
Can I move that we approve the minutes?
You can. Can we get a second on that?
Second.
I don't think you can second.
I
'cause
can't second.
You can't second because you're not a member of the task force. You are here in support, sorry. Mark, thank you. Any just further discussion? Although I appreciate the offer. All in favor? Task force members?
Wait for red.
Wait for it.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. So we'll do this drill at every meeting, and that's actually a good excuse to remind that I could have said earlier on the recap on the ground rules. We have 23 task force members, and we have 5 city and county staff people who are here in support of you. And those are Sheriff Trenery, Chief Templeman, Laney, David, and Mr. Stark over there from Snohomish County. So that crew is there here to provide information and ideas and support for you, but they're not technically voting members of the task force, okay? All right. So we're on meeting item 5. So behind the meeting summary and the meeting notes as corrected will be posted online is a couple of pieces of paper that are in response to questions that you asked at the last meeting. And before we talk about that, I just want to mention a couple of things. The first thing is about our mission. We've had some questions, about what's the scope of the mission. Are we just talking about homelessness? Are we just talking about crime? Is this all about homeless people? So what's the focus? And the truth is there's some duality to what we're talking about. So the name of the task force, remember, is the City Streets Initiative. The task force advisory is advisory to the city and the community. You'll be making recommendations to them. And when we looked at our mission last week that the mayor has given you, it's to make recommendations to address street-level social issues in Everett's commercial core areas. Now, street-level social issues are not defined in our mission. We talked about that last time. And let's talk about why. Last week, Dr. Fenn and Nate Marty gave a great presentation to us about demographics of the homeless population throughout Snohomish County. I mean, we had children and families, youth, single adults, people who are episodically homeless, people who are chronically homeless, people who have a lot of different issues going on. And our task force is focused on something less than the entire homeless population. We're focused on how homelessness is impacting the core commercial areas of Everett. And this is important, we're not just tasked with looking at homelessness. There are other street-level social issues in downtown and the other commercial areas. Specifically, there's criminal activity and other things going on, which are a challenge for the commercial areas. And while some homeless people may apparently be committing crimes, and we'll hear more about what the police do and do not know about that today, and also at our next meeting, it's really important that we not assume all criminal behavior is being conducted in our commercial areas by homeless people. Homeless people may be victims of crimes, and there are other non-homeless actors involved in some of the things that are troubling people that are going on downtown. And those criminal issues and other behaviors are an important part of our mission, as is homelessness downtown. So my one request last week was that everybody listen with an open mind, put ourselves in learning mode, and that is something we have to keep on doing. And this week, my additional request is this, that we need to commit to being able to talk about crime and other challenging issues downtown without saying or assuming that all homeless people are criminals. And that's just a really fundamental thing we have to get in our heads and be cognizant of as we have these difficult conversations. So again, homelessness is part of the central mission of the task force, but it looks also at looking at crime and other issues detrimental to the vitality of the downtown. So I wanted to just cover that again because we did get some questions about that. Are there any questions or comments about that before I move along? I hope that is, Pastor Dorway, yeah.
So, I mean, maybe this is semantical, maybe I misheard you. As we talk about crime, can we make it so that we assume that crime isn't necessarily always committed by homeless people? Is that what you just said?
That is what I just said.
Okay, I didn't.
We
It
must
seemed.
assume, we cannot assume that all
Okay,
crime
guys,
is
I
committed
was-
by the homeless. We must assume
Thank
it's
you.
okay to talk about crime, and when we're talking about crime, just by the fact that we are talking about crime, we are not assuming that that crime is being committed by homeless people.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood what you said. I
I'm
was
glad you-
definitely just trying to make the point that I would say when we talk about crime, we should make no assumptions on who is perpetrating those.
Does that help? Sorry if I was confusing. All right. Gee, it's fun walking around with these mics. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about logistically was the idea about ways for you guys to get additional in-person information about the issues we're dealing with. We talked about field trips that we're going to be having for the task force members to sign up to. And we will have sign-up sheets for those at the next meeting. We can't have more than 11 of you go to any one of them because it would be a quorum for the task force. We've got 5 in process, I believe. One is a tour of the Gospel Mission, the Compass Center, Evergreen Manor, a church feeding program, and Craig Scott Dahl has agreed to set up a walking and discussion tour of the downtown area as well. So we will have dates and times for those. We will have sign-up sheets for those next week, and we'd like you guys to go to at least one of them, and preferably it's more of that if you can find time in your schedule. So stand by for that. That'll be coming back next week. All right, where are we now? So I'd like folks to keep going. Okay, the question, you had asked several questions at the last meeting, and we have some information in response to those questions. There's a sheet right behind the minutes there, which is the demographics of the street-level social issues. This is a one-page recap of the presentation that Dr. Fenn and Nate Marty gave us last week, just some of the more interesting facts that they provided. They've scanned this and okayed it. There's also there had been a question about the number of individuals on waiting lists for subsidized housing in Everett and Snohomish County, and I think the city folks reached out both to the Housing Authority of Snohomish County and the Everett Housing Authority, and that information is on one page right here, and the Housing Authority of Snohomish County says that they have an unduplicated count of over 24,000 people on a waiting list for housing, and the Everett Housing Authority says it has approximately 5,650 people on its waiting list for Section 8 public housing and other public housing. So that was a response there. You had also asked for criminal statistics data, criminal data trends over time in Everett, and so the 3 pages behind that were provided by the police department. And I don't know whether Chief Templeman, would you like to speak briefly to this data? Could you go ahead? Oh yeah, good job, waiting for the mic and everything.
You've trained me well.
Thank you. Man.
Well, this data was actually provided by Dr. Fenn, but what this represents in this 3 to 4 pages. Page 1 is just a visual graph of historical uniform crime report data that the police department reports to the FBI on an annual basis dating back to 1985 up through 2012. That's the most current published data that we have. So that's the graph on the first page, looking at violent crimes per 100,000 population, and then looking at our property crime rate per 100,000 population. The next 2 pages are, this is the disclaimer, the warning that the FBI has on their website about crime statistics and crime data. And anytime I give a crime statistics presentation, you'll hear me reiterate this, that when looking at raw data, you've got to be very careful in terms of making assumptions, because there are a lot of different factors that go into and that impact crime in any given neighborhood, in any given city. And so in making blanket comparisons city to city is dangerous. Comparing Everett to Bellevue, for example, in terms of crime rate, very dangerous, because there are a lot of different demographics, different factors that impact that. And so this is a pretty extensive warning that the FBI publishes every year when they're publishing our uniform crime report statistics. The last page, which is a table, it's a table that represents the visual graph that we started with, and it just shows the numbers of violent crime totals in the gray dating back to 1985 through 2013. We actually added our 13 numbers on there, even though the FBI has not yet published those. We included it here, and you can see just in terms of violent crime for the city of Everett, when we look at ourselves last year in 2013, we had a total number of 443 violent crimes per 100,000 population. And if you look back, I think it goes back to 1994, right in that range, the last time our numbers were that low, 93, 94, in terms of our violent crime rate in the city of Everett. And then just taking a look at property crime rates, again, the 2013 total is in there, 6,884. That is just actually, that is the total. I'm sorry if I mentioned that earlier when I said 443 per 100,000, that's not correct. That's actually the total number of violent crimes that fits into that category. And same with the 6,884 property crimes. That was the total in that category that was reported to the FBI. And that number, again, with the exception of 2012, where we were slightly lower, if you go back, I think, to maybe about 2003, that was the last time we had a property crime rate reported to the FBI that was that low. So this, again, was in response to a request, I think, during the first meeting to look at some historical crime information. And I appreciate Dr. Fenn putting it all together and providing it for the group.
Thank you, Chief. A third of the 4 requests that you had asked about is the next page. It looks kind of like this, which was, there was a question about the demographics of the homeless population in Everett. This is from the PIT counts in 2013-2014. And you can see on this 82.5% were male, 17.5% female, 14% veterans, average age 40, 17.5% were between the ages of 18 and 24. And again, we talked last time about how the PIT count tends to undercount the homelessness. It's not like hugely statistically valid in any way, shape, or form, but this was the data that the county has available, and this is in response to that question that was raised at the last meeting. So there was one other question raised at the last meeting that we are still working on, which has to do with, I'm thinking it's crime stats. That the list of questions was supposed to be in the packet, but there's one other question that we'll get back to you on next week that you had asked at the last meeting. So with that, unless there are questions about those responses, I want to just roll forward to item 6 on our agenda, which is the review and hopefully approval of your charter that we spent a few minutes going through last time. That's right next, the very next thing in your packets. And we went through this in some detail at the last meeting. And we want to ask for whether or not you are willing to approve this as your sort of more detailed rules of the road beyond ground rules. The changes that you had asked for at the last meeting, one of them was in section 1A, right there on the first page, that as we explore and evaluate the issues and needs relative to street level social issues, that we also do so with consideration to impact citywide, including residential neighborhoods. So that language has been put in at the request of a task force member. The only other change in here has to do with allowing alternates. We had an extensive discussion at the last meeting about whether or not folks should be allowed to have alternates. And on page 2 at section 2B, you can see the main text where that is addressed. Task force members are strongly encouraged to attend all meetings. However, each task force member may designate a single alternate who can participate fully in the deliberations of the task force in the absence of the member. And unless otherwise approved by the city, alternates must be individuals in senior management positions within the member's organization and commit to remaining informed on the task force deliberations. And so there's a few other additional text changes throughout the balance of the document to make sure that alternates are included as appropriate. So those are the only changes that you had asked for. And if there are further questions about the task force charter, this would be a good time to ask. Or concerns about it. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the charter that's in your packets. Thank you, Flora. Sarah. Thank you, Georgia D. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? This is your task force charter. Thank you. Stick this back in your binders behind the panel roles and rules, and you can replace it with the one that's there now. And we now have our roadmap. So that's progress. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to move on to what appears on the screen here. Thank you to the magic of Anne running back to City Hall. So thank you to everybody for filling out the homework that we had sent on. And I'm going to move so that I can talk from somewhere else here. It's really great that we had such a good turnout and responses in filling this out. What this PowerPoint is, okay, you have all the raw data in your material. So every single word that I got back on homework is included in the document there in your packets. Does everybody see that document there? It's about 11 pages of really good input from folks. And I think if you had a chance to read it, you probably would have seen that there is a lot of commonality in the concerns that people have and their causes, perception of what the causes are. And this is a perceptions document. We were not reaching out for solutions at this stage of the game, but we got a lot of really good input. And there are certainly some important differences in your perspectives, but there was also a lot of agreement on what some of the challenges and the issues are. So that was good. This PowerPoint is my subjective summary of what is written down there. So you don't have to agree with how I have summarized this data. And if you think that I have really missed an important theme that you were trying to make, feel free. This PowerPoint is reproduced in your packet materials, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through this, which again is a sort of a subjective summary of the information I saw in the homework responses that you provided. Where am I going to stand so that I'm not in your way? And I can see the screen. And who actually has clicker control? Logistics. Where's the clicker? Where's the clicker? On the podium. Mouse at podium. Maybe I should go stand at the podium. All right, that works. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the concerns that were most frequently mentioned, and then we're going to break down into what each of those was and say a little bit more about those. Then we're going to turn to the underlying causes. So if I do this, what happens? Nothing. That looks good. Okay. I think as I looked at this, I saw 5 themes that came up most frequently. Increasing homelessness, mentally ill population, or other types of folks on the street. Second, a lot of concerns about public safety and crime. Third, a strong perception that there were not enough services to help those folks people see on the street. Fourth, a perception that there was not enough shelter or housing for those people, and that is why they were on the streets homeless. And fifth, there was a number of concerns about larger community issues. How much do we know? How well are we coordinated with each other? So let's, oops, I want to go forward. Come on. Oh, come on. Anybody that knows how to run this is welcome to come and help me. This is not working for me. I clicked and it went backwards.
Yes, there you go.
But
Just click it once on the left.
left. Oh, this is the problem. I'm left-handed, so I'm doing everything exactly backwards. Okay, good. It's not a diversity-trained mouse. Increasing homelessness, mentally ill, addicted, other street population. Again, there was a perception that there are more of these folks on the street, a recognition that they have a lot of challenges, including a lot of mental health and addiction problems for many of these individuals, and a lot of behaviors observed: panhandling, sleeping in doorways, hanging out in parks, and other areas. The second theme around public safety concerns and crime, a lot of input here. Concerns about drug use and drug dealing, especially heroin was mentioned several times. Public intoxication, you can see the list here. Theft, public urination, graffiti, litter, trespassing, solicitation. Observations that customers and residents do not feel safe, and observations that this kind of behavior is harmful to the economic vitality of the city. This is a list of some of the locations that were mentioned in the homework where people said they had experienced or observed problems happening. Clark Park, libraries, neighborhoods, garage, streets, alleys, Broadway and Evergreen, gas stations, Smith Street north of the Mission. This is not intended to be an exhaustive list, but this is the list that was mentioned specifically in the homework. Third theme there, inadequate services. This is pretty self-explanatory, but people were observing a lack of treatment services, a lack of jobs and job training, and also an insufficient amount of outreach services going to the homeless population. Inadequate shelter and housing, again, sort of self-evident, but folks were observing lots of different types of needs in terms of shelter, affordability, emergency housing, transitional housing, a lack of place to put people who were needing detox from alcohol or drug overdoses, lack of day centers, safe places for people to go during the day, lacking which they may just be hanging out on the street, lack of toilets and hygiene center facilities. So that was a pretty big list there as well. In terms of larger community issues, some folks observe that people, including themselves, may not know the best way to help the homeless, even if you wanted to. Some observe that there is a growing divide in society which may be contributing to the problem, that the homeless are often stigmatized, that the city and the service providers are not necessarily communicating well on what should be happening and what the problems are and what to do about them, and that the community itself may not be working really well together. The efforts are, while well-intended, are somewhat disconnected with some of the folks' observations, and that some of the things that are in place are Band-Aids that don't address the underlying causes of poverty and homelessness. In terms of turning now to underlying causes, the first thing you will probably notice is that there's some overlap here between the underlying causes and what people identified as their concerns. This is the 6 themes that I sort of picked up and how I would characterize them. A lot of comments about just the challenges that the street population has. Again, and going back to some of the concerns, lack of affordable housing and shelter, lack of services, lack of public understanding, lack of proactive coordination and communication between the city and providers. And then there was a number of new points in this half of the homework around too few police resources and some issues around the jail and how the jail is being operated. Let's break those down again. Population challenges, list of things that folks mentioned that they were concerned that were contributing to the number of folks that were on the streets and make them a challenging population to help often. And I think it was good observations that perhaps the homeless, in addition to people in the community working downtown, may not know how to help these folks. The homeless may not know how to get the help they need. Some of the homeless may not trust the service providers or feel comfortable staying in the shelters, and some of the homeless are in fact victimized when they're out on the street. Lack of affordable housing and shelter, again, the things that you would expect, the full range of types of housing, people observed that there are some gaps around the quantity of housing available to help the population that they see on the streets. The day centers, the detox beds, the triage center capacity. Again, lack of services, comprehensive input here on the lack of services and the types of things that folks thought would be needed to help the homeless population and others on the street. Lack of jail transition services, we'll probably get into more at next week's meeting. We have a whole long panel on the criminal justice system and how it interfaces with homeless and other social street level issues here in downtown. Lack of access to health care. Some services may not be helping people move out of poverty and out of homelessness, and other types of services, some folks said, well, these actually are making things worse. Not enough unrestricted services. In other words, you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to access the service, and that may be a barrier to people getting the help they need. And that the education system is not necessarily meeting the needs, which may be contributing to people ending up in homelessness. If I'm going way the heck too fast, just throw something at me. But I know you guys know how to read, so I'm going fast. Lack of public understanding. People don't understand the issues of those in poverty. No comprehensive strategy to help. People don't know always how to help in the most constructive ways. Funding, there's other priorities for the money. And some folks observed a lack of compassion. Again, all these points, the themes were mentioned by several people. These individual points may have only been mentioned by one or two, but this captures the range of input under those themes as I'm going through this. Lack of proactive coordination between the city and providers. So no one is in charge necessarily about how we should tackle this problem. Services are not necessarily well coordinated. They may be duplicated. Not great communication between the city and service providers, questioning if we're even providing the right services, and again, questioning how we can help. So these are all things that we can tackle. So it's interesting, and this is a doable list here. We can start talking to each other better. But a number of folks had comments around this. Too few police resources and some issues around the jail. We're almost done here. Need more bike cops, more foot patrols, park rangers, proactive policing, more policing. Again, this is all resource issues, of course. If money were no object, we might be getting a lot different answers here. People not getting tough enough sentences, frequent cyclers, there's no good solutions for those folks, and the inability to book some of the chronic homeless into jail. And again, that sort of relates to the preceding, if there's a good solution for them really there in the jail. So in sum, there was a lot of commonality in terms of the concerns that you identified and the causes that you identified. Certainly some important differences in the perspectives that people registered. Several of the concerns you identified are also underlying causes. There are knowledge gaps and coordination gaps, which are probably relatively easy to address in comparison perhaps to the resource challenges, the amount of money available to fill the gaps and address the concerns that we've identified. And people had lots of ideas about ways to improve the situation. So we have lots of places to go in our conversation, and I think we have a fair amount of commonality from which to have those conversations. So I really appreciate this input. I think it was very helpful to me to understand what you guys are seeing, and I hope it was helpful to you. I encourage you to read the input from your peers here on the task force and see what they were saying and really hear what other folks are experiencing and being worried about. Does anybody have any questions on this before we move on to our first panel? Or comments? Scary, bad, good? Are we done yet? Any of those questions? Okay. I think then, again, thank you for doing that homework. I think it is helpful. It helps us move things along here a little quicker. So with that, we are ready to move to our first presentation, agenda item 8, around Everett's commercial core areas, vision and challenges. And this panel is scheduled to last about 45 minutes. That'll be tight. It may mean we have to cut off some of the questions. I'm going to propose that we let each speaker give their presentation. We have 4 speakers, and take questions from that speaker for a couple of minutes after that speaker is done, and then move to the next speaker, and we'll try to see how close we are to 45 or 50 minutes at that point. We're a few minutes ahead of time, so I've got a little bit more time to allocate to this panel, but not that much. And I know about then you're really going to want a break. So with that, I would like to invite up Dave Koenig, who is a senior planner with the city. Oh, he's there. He's ready to go.
I just can't find the...
You just can't find the PowerPoint. That's a thing. but we have people working on that.
Top one. Top one. Go up one.
Okay.
Interesting to do this on a,
Where's that little chair thing that says? Slideshow, if you click on slideshow, does that help? F5?
okay, there you go. Thank you. Good afternoon. As I mentioned, I'm Dave Koenig. I work in the planning department. My area of responsibilities include long-range planning, some major projects, and also funding community development, so housing, social services, and the funding that the city, both from the general fund and from pass-through funds, goes towards social services and housing. I've been asked to talk about, I've been asked to talk about the long-term vision of the commercial areas in the community, Everett Station, some population growth, future major investments in the core, and then some challenges. The areas I'm going to talk about quickly are listed here, but these are kind of the major commercial areas within the community. We've been doing an update to our comprehensive plan, and I thought it'd be interesting for you to know that this is general for the entire community. We've done vision exercises over the years, and in the past, the vision priorities included economic diversification, shoreline access, access to the water, multimodal transportation, education, four-year college, protecting neighborhoods, improve parks and recreation, affordable housing, and special needs citizens. This year, for the first time, homelessness has been identified by citizens who we've met with, climate change, and public safety. So those are the kind of new vision comments that have come in as a part of our update for the 2030 comprehensive plan. Years ago, the city looked at what we should do in the sense of the growth of the city and where should we put our investments. And at that point, it was decided not just to focus on the downtown, not to focus on the harbor front or the riverfront, but to try to do all three things and bring the community together across the north end. And so you see here at the very north end is the Marina District, which the port is in the process of redeveloping, the downtown, the riverfront project, and then Everett Station was developed where it is, where we are today. And so that was the driving force in a lot of what we did over time. We did a downtown plan in 2006, and that was, the themes there was to create a compact, pedestrian-friendly neighborhood, clean, safe, attractive environment. To increase housing downtown was important. A variety of uses in the downtown and building styles, connected to Everett Station, waterfront and neighborhoods, streetscape improvements, and we've heard a number of times, and distinct identity and needed on gateways is that when we talk to developers, the need to have good image when you come into the community on the streetscape and also gateways, quality design in new buildings, and to preserve historically significant buildings. What we heard about living downtown, because that was one of the things that we identified as important for the redevelopment of downtown, is to have more quality housing, shopping, and dining options, spaces for gathering and social interaction, cleaner streets and buildings, secure parking for residents, cultural and entertainment activities, and more inviting streets like the city had on Colby and Hewitt that we redid a few years ago. We did an Everett Station area plan in 2005, and that plan looked at evolving and enhancing the area around here as an employment center, looking at combining technology, research, development, fabrication, and kind of a flex tech area, continue the industrial feel much like the Pearl District in Portland, with work-live units, housing integrated into the area, and creating a unique district here in the Everett Station area, and also to encourage transit-supported development. I was at a meeting yesterday, and I thought I'd just pass this on because we are talking about homeless, but somebody was making a comment about Sound Transit, and somebody who just retired from Sound Transit who was dealing with transit-supported development around stations. And they mentioned that Sound Transit actively, because they have land that they purchased, and they are building some housing around it, but they're building like art space and other housing, but they do not want homeless facilities next to their stations. And the reason is, and I'm just passing it on, not putting a value judgment, but they're interested in having people take transit, and they want to encourage people to take transit, and they thought homeless facilities near the transit was detrimental. So in the redeveloped areas that Sound Transit owns and in selling properties, that's their goal. So I just wanted to pass that on. That was relevant to what I think you're thinking here. Everett Station, to continue on, since I was asked to emphasize this, was also build on the strength and key assets within the vicinity, including the Comcast Arena, improve the visual appearance of the area, thereby contributing to the image of Everett and its downtown, develop clear and attractive connections between Everett Station and surrounding development, create a district with a strong sense of place, with a distinct character and quality that would appeal to investors, employees, and visitors. Improve the public safety, including adequate sidewalks, crosswalks, lighting, traffic controls in the area. And encourage development that reflects the quality of Everett Station and the downtown. Here's a graphic that shows where Everett Station is related to the downtown. And city spent quite a lot of time picking a location that would fit, that would have all the transit modes coming to this facility. And there's like 900 transit buses a day coming here. So it's a huge facility from the standpoint of being a multimodal facility, and is functioning very well. Skagit County, Community Transit, Sound Transit, Everett Transit, all come to this station, and people transfer. As it relates to the downtown area and the areas that I was talking about, the orange circle there in the center around the station area, that's about 1/4 mile. That's an area, from a planning standpoint, people are very willing to walk. The dark black line, that's a dashed line around, is a 1/2 mile. That's also the area that people are willing to walk if they feel safe and it's a nice walk and such. And so you can see Everett Station has most of the downtown. The Wall Street building is within that 1/2 mile, and the whole county campus as an example. Residential to the north and south, and then also the riverfront development that's to the south and east. All are within walking distance of Everett Station here. This is some images that we did at the time showing the type of look that could happen here. These are just graphic illustrations of some thinking by the architects that we had on board on that. The Riverfront Master Plan was accomplished in 2009. This is the public-private partnership the city's had with the idea of taking the landfill and old industrial sites. Everett has had a challenge with its roots, meaning the industrial areas, where they've been very polluted. A lot of money was needed to recover the land so it can be reused. That has been happening. It's kind of quiet. You don't really notice it too much, but these lands are going to start being reused between the port and the city in the very short term. And so where we used to have a paper mill, very industrial, gritty history that we have, which is positive. You don't want to walk away from it, but at the same time, there is a legacy there. The Simpson pad will be starting construction this year, and we'll see people starting to live down there in 2015. What's also unique about it is this graphic you see up there is the public amenities that connects it to the Lowell neighborhood, connects it to Everett Station. There's a connection at 36th Street over here that's There'll be a bridge there eventually, so you can walk right over to, here's the station right here. The trails along, these are trails, the yellow ones are new trails, the red ones are existing. This yellow one here is actually in now. You can walk from 36th Street south down here, see the wetlands that have been restored, and walk all the way over here. So there's now, from here around to there, you can do this. When the development happens, there'll be a trail around the development. This is in this connection here. So the connection of this to the west and the improvement in having people live here is going to be a reality. The Simpson pad is right here. There's going to be 233 single-family homes there. There'll be 190 townhouses over here, and eventually commercial residential office on the landfill. The Marina District is the ports project that they're being redone. We have an application that just came in to redo, to modify some of the standards and image that was there before. The port has taken that over from the original Maritime Trust developer. This area is going to build on the waterfront location and fishing fleet, housing, jobs, recreation, and public access, protect and restore the ecological functions, and create public attractions to allow people to be down along the shoreline. Here's some images that they've done. This is where the net sheds used to be. They're bringing back the fishing industry. The old plan did not have that, but they plan on having the fishing fleet there where you can walk and then see them there, and then also have more access right at the water level. And here's some more images of that development. On North Broadway, we did some plans on 2009 for there. There's a college district is being looked at, the four-year college and student housing, so it's Everett Community College, WSU, and all you have to do is go up there and see, you know, the great expansion that's been happening. Also the hospital and the college, with the city's encouragement, did a land swap to allow both of them to expand up there. And we think it's to the benefit of that area for both of those areas to improve. We also did improve development standards along the corridor and more intensive development, including residential. In 2012, we did the Evergreen Way Plan that was a follow-up to the Swift Bus Rapid Transit that is now going up and down from this is a terminus here in the north end. It goes all the way down to Snohomish County border. There's 4,500 people a day that are on that. We see the Evergreen Way as being a major transportation and business corridor that would be upgraded, that'd be a greater compatibility with abutting neighborhoods, need to maintain vehicle access and upgrade the aesthetics along there. Also, we're interested in seeing more redevelopment and investment along Evergreen Way, support and encourage new business, accommodate growth, and maximum use of the transit investments that were put there. Everett Mall, we haven't done a plan on Everett Mall Way in recent time, besides what's there, but it's a corridor that has commercial and residential uses, mixed use, but they're separated, not in the same buildings. So there's like apartment buildings and commercial. Both are allowed, but they've been developed separately. We feel that this area, especially the mall, needs more study in the future, mall area, and big box commercial uses. Silver Lake Everett Bothell Highway, that's an area where it's a sensitive stream and lakes and wetlands along there, so there's less development potential, but and the sensitivity to the residential to the east, and again some big box commercial, and then the residential and commercial development has been in separate rather than integrated in the same. Population growth, this is part of our 2035 update. We are exploring three alternatives. One is one that the county council established that's consistent with Vision 2040 from the Puget Sound Regional Council, and that would have the city in 2035 be 165,000 people. We're now 104,900. So it's quite a growth of 60,000 over 20 years. And then jobs would be 145,000, up 15,000. And you could see City Council set a moderate growth scenario for us that was less, and you can see the numbers there. And then the existing plan, if we just extended the existing plan, that would be less growth. These are aspirational numbers. You know, there's no way we can guarantee those, but that's what we're planning for. I was kind of on a downbeat after 2 weeks ago after seeing some statistics, so I thought I'd show a positive one, because one thing that Everett has done in the downturn is increase in employment, mainly because of the Boeing company, but also other industries. And you can see in 2007 at the downturn of development, we were 78,667 jobs. These are from the Puget Sound Regional Council. These are covered employment. What covered employment is ones that for unemployment insurance and that type of thing. So it's not self-employed people. So what you have to do is add 15 to 10% on top of these numbers for total employment. So you can see in 2011, the 84,896 is the covered employment, but the Puget Sound Regional Council estimated we had 93,700 and some jobs. And you can see every year we've risen. So since 2007, which was the downturn to 2013, we've added significant job growth, over 12,000. And this is within the city of Everett area, just in covered employment. So if you add that 10% to that, we're over 100,000 jobs within the city of Everett for a population of 104,000. So I think that, there are, I'm very bullish on Everett's future, especially with the job growth we've seen, and then also the development projects that I've shown a little bit here, those districts, and those things moving ahead. Future investments, I was asked to look in the downtown core. The riverfront public amenities and northern road access will be done. This will be both public and private funding from the developer down there. Rucker Avenue from Pacific to Everett is on our radar to do as an improvement. The city is also working on a harborfront pedestrian bridge from Grand Avenue Park to the Marina District. Freight corridor for freight that would go up Rucker Avenue from 41st, Rucker, West Greenview Drive to have that being the freight corridor. And then also pedestrian and bicycle improvements in the area. Some challenges, I was asked to talk about that, is accommodating the growth while maintaining and improving quality of life. Financing public infrastructure is a huge issue based on how money is collected these days. Homelessness is not a North End issue. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've worked with both Walmart and QFC, and I thought you'd like the Walmart example. Walmart developed a wetland in South Everett between the Highway 99 and Walmart, and it's treed and such. Well, it's now become a homeless encampment, and they have found an increase in theft rate on their camping equipment. So, it's not just a North End issue. Walmart actually has a specialist goes around to their stores and works on homeless issues, and so staff met with him out there, and we're working with them on how to deal with that issue out there. And then QFC, we've had some conversations with them, but in talking to both of them, they say Everett isn't unique, that all their stores, wherever they are, they're having issues. So we're not like a community that has bigger challenges than other communities. Some other challenges, one of the things, the Gospel Mission, is down on Smith Street, and the city helped fund that facility to create it where it is. We put general fund in to help build that facility there. Plus, we've, over the years, put money into it to help do things like boiler systems and showers and such with funding that we have. But in the past, that was an okay area because we were moving them off Hewitt Avenue because they used to be down the lower Hewitt on the corridor. And now we've had issues with property owners in the area about them being in that location. So one of the challenges that we've had is that locations for shelters that were okay in the past are now problematic. On one hand, it's because those areas are improving. When the shelter went down there, where it's on Smith Street, it was a bunch of tow yards and, underutilized property, and that area has now improved, and so now it's become an issue. Also, from a standpoint, I was asked to, as a planning department, what have we been doing to think about brainstorming and dealing with homeless and street issues as a department? And my response is that in our department, we do the basics: permitting, long-range planning, administrating and implementing grants. We don't have time to sit back and kind of think about things that we aren't assigned to do, so we don't have that freedom and time. We also fund shelter improvements and maintenance of operations. Every shelter that's in town, from DVS to Cocoon Complex, we are involved with funding that through our federal and pass-through funds. And from a staffing level, we've gone at the peak from 38 people to 18 people. And that includes, there's about one of us, FTE, that deals with human needs issues in the community. You compare that to Snohomish County, if you add Snohomish County planning departments and human needs departments, there's almost 300 people. So, so you do that type of comparison, we have 18 staff people dealing with planning issues, housing issues, homeless, in sense of our funding and such. And if you compare that, of course, they have a much broader responsibility, but it is a huge difference in the sense of when you're looking and saying earlier, well, the city should be doing this or that, you've got to look at what the resources are, and that's what they are. Next thing, I was asked to talk a little bit about some of the housing, and
Dave,
sure.
I know, are you thinking like a couple more minutes? Because I know we're just chewing it together.
Okay, 2 slides.
Thank you.
This is the last 2. In 1998, the city enacted a law to allow property tax exemption for housing in the downtown. Up to that point, there had been 400 units built in downtown in recent time from 1998. And out of that 400, 40 were market rate and 360 were assisted. So the part of the issue was, let's try to get more market rate housing. Since that time, there was also another 2 projects that were built that were assisted, but that's what's in downtown. And since then, we've seen market rate housing being built, taking advantage of those tax credits. There's been 548 that have been built, and currently there's some under construction or have been approved. And so that's another 382 that are pending. And so you're looking at almost 1,000 units since 1998 that are taking advantage of that tax credit in the downtown area. We were told by the industry that they needed that tax credit to move ahead, and I'll stop there.
Are there questions for Dave? We gave him an absolutely impossible list of questions to answer, and he actually did a totally fabulous job. The list of impossible questions is right behind his presentation, which next time it'll be in the front. But this tells you the sort of stuff that we asked him to answer, 2 pages. Flora, question, and grab that mic if you would. Yeah, there, that works.
Okay, so last time we looked at some data talking about how some people who are homeless aren't necessarily constantly homeless, but they might be a paycheck away from becoming homeless due to the cost of housing. And so my question is, how much do you think increasing lower cost housing can help people from becoming homeless in the first place, and thus reduce our total homeless population, as opposed to just only a shelter for after the fact? So I guess preventing it from happening in the first place by increasing in lower cost housing.
Well, there is an emphasis now at the federal government level for rapid rehousing, because it is cheaper to do that than put people in shelters all the time. So that's a goal. Gates Foundation and their Sound Families initiative, which we've been involved with, found that, and it's changed a little bit the numbers, but it's about right, that difference between homelessness for a family and not being homeless was $1,800. That, if they had a medical issue, their minimum wage job, they have a medical issue, something comes up, that was a difference. So if they had that money in some way, that would stop them from being homeless. So they found that. So that's one thing in the sense of prevent homelessness. And then the rapid rehousing is one where getting them into housing quickly as possible and not have it as something that continues on for a long time.
And I think that Ken is going to speak a little bit more
Yeah.
to that issue as well. Other questions here? Ed, you have a question?
So Dave, could you explain to us, for us, the comprehensive plan timeframes, the current plan, and then the vision responses were for the year 2035?
Yeah,
And
the
then-
update.
And then how the comprehensive plan might relate to the work that we're doing here.
The comprehensive plan update is required to be adopted by council by June 2015. So a part of that will be, as in relating to this committee, a part of that we have a housing element. And within that housing element, we're supposed to address housing issues. Quite frankly, we've dealt with low-income housing and the need for more affordable housing. We've never in that plan focused on homelessness. There is a homelessness plan that the county has adopted in the past, which we also as a city adopted, but we haven't really addressed that specifically in the plan.
This is an update of a plan that has how many years in it?
Well, last time it was updated was in 2005. It'll be updated again in 8 years by state law, so to be adopted in 2015 and updated in another 8 years.
So this update will sort of create the framework for planning and implementation for the next 8 years.
Right.
Thank you. Other questions for Dave? Comments about the presentation? Okay, well, let's keep moving. Our next presenter, thank you, Dave, very much. Our next presenter is Chief Templeman, and he has a handout here. I'm guessing if I start about here.
Well, good afternoon. As I introduced myself earlier, Dan Templeman with the Police Department. And I want to start by, first of all, talking a little bit about what I'm going to present today. And what you're going to be seeing today is just a snapshot over the last 5 years of some of the crime information that we have collected in the downtown, what we call the Central Business District. And generally, in the first slide that you see here is the area that we were looking at, which is roughly Everett Avenue to the north, but there's a certain portion that extends beyond Everett Avenue, and then to the south, Pacific Avenue, to the east, Broadway, and then to the west, down to the waterfront. As I mentioned earlier today, and I'm just going to mention it again today as we get into some of these crime stats, you're going to see some just raw numbers in some of the material that I've provided. And again, I just caution anybody here and anybody that is going to be viewing and having access to this data, caution you about making generalized comparisons without really looking at the data and the other factors and issues that may be impacting those numbers. The other thing that I want to do before I start jumping into these numbers is just stress again what's been brought up a couple times today and the way we at the police department look at some of these issues that we're seeing in the commercial areas of the city of Everett. And that is that, the way we look at it, this is not a homeless issue. This is, what we're talking about are some of the low-level street crime situations that we're seeing in some of the commercial areas and even pushing at times into some of our residential neighborhood areas. So what we see out on the street, certainly we see situations and instances where individuals who are homeless are committing crimes. We see situations where individuals who are homeless are victims of crimes. We see people committing crime who have permanent residences throughout the city of Everett. And so the way we look at it from the police department perspective is we're looking at the conduct, we're looking at the issues, and trying to address that as the root cause. So you'll hear me stress that at different times throughout this presentation and beyond. So again, that's just the general area. One of the things that we looked at in terms of our crime stats going into this was all of the crime that was occurring in this certain area that I've identified. And then we broke it down into misdemeanor crimes, which address, and you'll see the list that we looked at, more of the low-level nuisance type crimes that are occurring that we see most frequently. Those would fall in, when I talked earlier about the uniform crime report and the 6,884 under property crimes, a lot of those fall into that category as opposed to violent crimes. So this is just a snapshot here of all the crimes. What we looked at were police reports. We didn't look at calls for service. So what you're seeing here in these numbers are actual police reports generated. So this number will vary if we looked at calls for service. Calls for service will likely be higher in some, well, they will be higher than police reports. But we wanted to focus in on situations where our officers respond and actually find a crime occurring and then document that crime. So what I just want to point out here, a couple things. When you look at these numbers over the last 5 years, 2009 to 13, what you generally see there is the top 3 police reports that are generated in this zone that I identified are traffic collisions, warrant services, and criminal traffic offenses. So driving on a suspended license, DUI, those types of things. Those are the top 3 that we see in terms of the types of offenses occurring in the downtown core. Now, obviously, and I'll show you, there are a bunch of other ones, but these are the top ones. And so in 2013, you see the total there of, when you take all 3 of those, combine the 194 collisions, the 258 warrants, services, and then the 190 driving offenses, that was a total of 642. So about 26% of all the crime that we saw in the central business district in 2013 were related to these 3 categories. And so when I looked over the 5-year period, what I discovered was that about 24%, since 2009, about 24% of all crimes that we have reported in this central business district are in those 3 categories. Below that, we just looked at locations, where the crime is occurring or where we're generating the highest number of police reports. And obviously it's not a surprise, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that the number 1 location is the police station, because we have a desk officer. We obviously take reports there, and so we get a tremendous number of walk-in complaints. So those crimes may not necessarily be occurring at the police station, but they're occurring elsewhere, but that's where they're reported. And so also City Hall, the Wall Street building is there. And again, going back, looking in general from 2009 to 2013, what we discovered was about 13% of all the police reports generated in that central business district were generated at these 3 locations, and Goodwill at 3102, Hoyt being the other. The total number of offenses at the very bottom, when we looked at just this year, we wanted to get a snapshot of where we are at this year. So far, we're at 1,216 total offenses. This would be misdemeanor and felony offenses, police reports. And at the same period in 2013, when we went and looked from January 1 through July 31st, we were at 1,423. So right now, we're looking at about a 15% decrease in the overall number of reported crimes in the central business district area. So that's going to be your biggest snapshot of all crime in this area. Now we're going to just get into the misdemeanor crimes and some of the crimes that we've been hearing about most frequently in terms of the interactions we've had with the community on the street. So in looking at misdemeanor crimes, 2009 through 2013, and then what I did ask the analysts that were working on this for me and analyzing some of this data was to provide a projection for 2014 based upon our year-to-date numbers today and what we've seen historically over the last 5 years. And so what you'll see is there is a big drop between 2010 and 2012. And then in 2013, we saw an increase in misdemeanor offenses. And I'll get into what those misdemeanor offenses are that we were looking at. And what we're seeing now, based upon the number, and again, we're looking January 1st of this year through the end of July for 2014, and that's in the box right at the bottom, that we're at 356 reported misdemeanor offenses in this central business district area. And then when projecting that out for the year, that's where you see the red dot, that if everything holds constant and the law of averages works out, that's the general area where we will end the year. And this again is reported offenses where officers have gone out and taken a police report. So if in fact we continue this trend in terms of overall misdemeanor offenses, we'll see a 5.4% decrease in 2014 over the previous year. Next slide gets into what we looked at. That previous slide where I had the numbers in the 354 reports, these are the crimes that we looked at. And really what I tried to focus on and what I was asked to focus on were some of the misdemeanor offenses and a lot of the nuisance type crime and petty crime that is being reported in this area. And I'll tell you, with these numbers, and here's kind of another caution as we go through this, our system that we use for data collection and analyzing is very old. We're in the process of a complete upgrade to that system, and we hope that that's going to go live sometime in the first quarter of next year, which will really revolutionize for us our ability to analyze data and have accurate, current data. But the system we're using right now is from the early 80s, I believe, maybe late. I can't remember, but it's really old. And so some of these numbers change. For example, the 2014 numbers, they may change a little bit as offenses are recoded. As some of the reports come in, these numbers do change a little bit. So if you're adding them up, they may not come up exactly. They're going to be pretty close, but nonetheless, these are the general offenses that we looked at. And as you can see, the most common offenses we see, and this is not unique to the downtown core. Theft from auto, which is vehicle prowl, where somebody breaks into your vehicle and steals something out of there. Criminal mischief, which is vandalism, and then theft. Those are generally our top categories of crime, and we'll find that in the neighborhoods as well. So it's not a unique trend just to the downtown core. So in addition to crime, all crimes, which was the first slide we looked at in the boxes, and misdemeanor crimes, I also wanted to take a look at our mental health, a couple of different categories that I think are relevant to the discussion that we're having here today. And so the first one we're going to talk about is mental health related offenses. And again, these aren't calls for service, these are actual police reports generated by an officer. And what you see is, dating back to 2009, a steady increase up until 2012, and then in 2012 we saw a 33% decrease in this downtown core area in the number of reports generated involving mental health related offenses. And again, I wanted to take a look because this drop that we're seeing here was not necessarily consistent with, if I went out and asked my officers, what are you guys seeing out on the street? They would say, this is not real consistent with what we're seeing on the street, nor is it consistent with what I've been hearing when I listen to the police radio every day. And so we had some additional work done to look at 2014 again in a projection. And so you'll see there in the far right-hand column on the table that so far, through the end of July, we're at 41 reports regarding mental health related offenses. And then if you look just one box to the left, you look in 2013, that total was 41. So already, as of the end of July, we've hit the entire last year's total. So if we project out, we're looking at about a 32% increase, which again represents that red dot, which now becomes more in line with what we're seeing out on the street, that we're seeing an increase in these types of calls for service and ultimately police reports. Loitering related offenses, this is real sporadic because again, it comes and goes, and as you can see from the chart, there's no real pattern that we've seen here. It goes up and down year to year, and again, that could be based on a whole number of factors that will be discussed throughout the entire time we're together. But what I will note is between 2012 and 2013, we saw a 29% increase in the number of police reports generated for these categories: unlawful camping, trespassing, and failure to disperse. And then again, projecting out based upon where we're at as of the end of July at 19 police reports, it looks like if everything goes the same as the trend we've seen, that we'll see a slight decrease there of about 8% by the end of the year. And then the last area that we looked at for this presentation today had to do with drug and alcohol related offenses. And again, focusing here primarily on misdemeanor type drug and alcohol offenses. And the numbers, when you look at 2012 to 2013, you'll see a pretty significant drop there. And again, when I saw this graph, I thought this just doesn't make sense with what we're seeing and what I hear on the police radio every day. So we wanted to look at our 2014 numbers. And so looking at our 2014 numbers and looking at the red dot, that is the projection, which would be about a 22% increase from 2013 if the numbers continue in the trend that we've seen so far. So I think that explains a little bit what we're seeing. You know, if I came in here today and showed you guys all these graphs with everything going down, we'd be thinking, well, why are we even here? And so I think that these projections out in 2014 help to put it in perspective, a little bit more context in terms of what we're seeing in the commercial areas and in this particular presentation, the downtown core. So I think I'm going to stop there for now. I do know that next week we will have Lieutenant Bruce Bosman here participating in the panel. We'll have more information on some of these types of situations and some of the issues that the officers are seeing at street level. But this is just a real high-level overview of crime over the last 5 years in the core downtown area.
David, you can ask questions. Have at it.
I can't vote, but I can ask questions.
Yep, that's the deal. And
Yeah,
then
I just wanted to clarify, on the mental health related offenses, what that means is you're called out to respond to an incident, and when you get there, it becomes apparent that the individual suffers from some kind of mental illness, right?
Yes, it's a situation where we get called out, or we may even proactively go out because we see something going on that catches our attention, and we go out on scene, and then ultimately we write a police report on it. So it may be a situation where we don't have to take anybody to triage center, to the hospital, or more likely it is a situation where we're providing them some level of service.
Thanks.
Yes.
Mark and then Mark. I probably got that backwards, but let's do that anyway. Go ahead, Mark. We need to get you a mic.
Thanks, Chief. My question is, are there other statistics that might be helpful to the situation? I know at the Everett Clinic we have our own security force, which we cooperate very well with the Everett Police Department. But I bet you we're issuing 20 to 25 no trespass orders a month, and just around our main campus. So I wondered do other folks in the downtown district employ private security or anything else that, might be relevant to this situation?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that, without going into great detail, is that there are a lot of different enterprises and businesses out there that are taking a proactive approach like the Everett Clinic, and I know that we work very closely with you on that in terms of posting their businesses, posting their facilities as no trespassing, issuing no trespassing notices that then allows us as police, if we run into a situation where you've got a chronic repeat type situation where we do have some level of enforcement that we may be able to take. And so that is occurring throughout the city, and we probably could come up with a list of businesses and entities that have engaged in that type of cooperation with us. But as far as those numbers, I don't know that they would necessarily all keep them to the level of detail that the Everett Clinic does. But yeah, that partnership has been very valuable to us.
Mark, I don't know if is that mic still there working? All right, use it.
Yeah, you commented several times that the numbers don't kind of correlate to what you hear on the radio. And I guess my question would be, is that possibly due to, at least as far as the central business district, that there's more emphasis with bike patrols and stuff like that, and the levels of crime in that area are going down and being pushed down, for example, into the transit station area where we're located at?
Well, that's a tough question. You know, we see with our emphasis patrols wherever we enact an emphasis patrol, and whether it's right now, for example, we as a police department are currently employing DDACs, data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety, where we're deploying our resources in areas where crime is occurring, where our analysts are showing us where crime is occurring, and there is a displacement factor that does take place, and we've seen that, you know, where the crime rate may go down in some of those areas, but then we look at other areas and we see an increase in crime, and so our job then becomes staying on top of that and moving those resources and utilizing those resources until you can displace it either out of our city or address it more permanently. And so I think, you know, if you look, and I'll be giving a presentation, you know, at City Council later this month, you know, that looks at crime in the neighborhoods. And so, but in general, the trend that we're seeing even in the neighborhoods, for the most part, is a drop in 2013. Now, 2014 numbers they're not fully there yet. But I do think that a certain level of displacement does occur, and then we start focusing in on those areas where that's moving to.
So, Chief, do you think that the numbers reflect the number of reports that were completed, right? Not responses, correct? So I'm just wondering, is there a decrease because police officers are still responding to calls, but are diverting or looking for other like preventative measures versus suppression?
You know, as far as, again, and when you look at the 2014 numbers, we're seeing that increase. I wasn't able to look at the data enough and dig deep enough into it to see what may have caused these drops that we saw in 2013. You know, whether it was you know, additional services that were available at that time that maybe don't exist now, the number of individuals that we're contacting that fall into some of these categories has increased in 2014 for whatever the reason is. But again, you know, calls for service are probably what we see most often, is that they follow this same trend, except it's just a little bit higher line, but it's going to follow the same trend pattern historically when we look at that.
Do our first of probably a continuing series of triage activities to get us out of here on time. I'm going to let you guys take a break now, but we're going to definitely start at in like 10 minutes, come heck or high water, and we're going to give the next 20 minutes to Craig and Sean to finish up this panel, so that hopefully we won't take too much time away from Ken Stark's presentation.